Ninth session of the Senate in the first regular session of the 17th Congress is hereby called to order. Let us observe a minute of silent prayer. Amen. Secretary, please call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano, De Lima, Drilon, Ejercito, Escudero, Gatchalian, Gordon, Hunasan, Ontiveros, Lacson, Ligada, Pacquiao, Pangilinan, Po, Recto, Soto, Trillanes, Villanueva, Villar, Suberi, Senate President Pimentel.
With 15 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 78th session, May 8, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
Is there any objection? There being none, we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 78th session, May 8, 2017, and consider the same as approved.
Mr. President, would like to welcome the guests of the Senate President, Attorney Elba Cruz, the President of the Development Academy of the Philippines, DAP, Nick Laconico, the CIO of DAP, Fema Duterte, Josel Obenza of DAP, and from Japan, guests also of the Senate President, Malu Cruz Hamashima, Hope Concepcion, Esperanza Concepcion, and the guests of Senator Zubiri, Mayor Omaraji Pizarro of Kailangan, Bukidnon.
Welcome to all of our guests.
Mr. President, on a matter of public interest, to speak on a matter of public interest, I move that we recognize Senator Vic Zubiri.
Is there any objection? There being none, Senator Zubiri is recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Mr. President, esteemed colleagues. Number one bar topnotcher. Last Wednesday, the Supreme Court unveiled the awaited results of the 2016 Philippine Bar exam. The 2016 bar will go down as one of the most memorable in history, having a 59 or close to 60% passing rate, its highest in 16 years. Also setting this bar apart from the rest is the fact that all the 10 top-notchers are from schools outside of Metro Manila, 3 of whom are from Mindanao. This is unprecedented, as Manila-based schools usually dominate the top 10. As a matter of fact, I heard a joke that Ateneo, San Beda, and UP deans all complained because they said that the bar was in Bisaya. And that's why the top 10 are all Bisaya. Today, I'm elated to rise, Mr. President, on a matter of personal and collective privilege to congratulate the top-notcher of the 2016 bar exams. Her name is Karen May Kalam, who I'm proud to say is my kababayan from Kalilangan, Bukidnon. Mr. President, may I ask her to stand? Take a bow. To my recollection, this is the first time that someone from Bukidnon topped the bar. Of course, there is one from Cagayan de Oro who topped the bar as well, and he is now our Senate President. I take personal pride in her feat, Mr. President, and soon to be Attorney Karen, as I think they have to take their oath, and her mom, Mrs. Merlin Kalam, are here with us in the gallery today. I would like to take a short moment to also recognize Merlin, the mother, Miss Merlin. I'm sure that you are very proud of your daughter, ma'am, and clearly you have done an amazing job in raising her to be an exemplary woman that she is today. Aside from being a fresh bar passer, Karen is also a certified public accountant who hails from the municipality, as I mentioned earlier, Kalilangan, Bukidnon. And she's a product of our public basic education system completing her primary and secondary education at the Kalilangan Elementary School and Kalilangan High School, respectively. Later, she graduated from the oldest university in Cebu, the University of San Carlos, and now holds the distinction of being her alma mater's first ever law graduate to rank first in the Philippine bar exam. Karen now joins the ranks of prominent lawyers who rank first in the bar. As I mentioned earlier, the person who leads this chamber, Senate President Coco Pimentel, and many other bar top-notchers in history that have graced this very institution, served by other branches of government that held some of the highest positions of the land. Karen is an inspiration to the people of Bukidnon and other provinces like Sarangani. At no matter where you come from, or despite any odds stacked against you and against your favor, there is no dream too big or goal too impossible to achieve. When you work hard, find a way to love what you do, and set a purpose for your work, you may surprise yourself and others with what you can achieve. In just a few weeks, she will take her oath and sign the roll of attorneys. Soon, Karen, you'll officially affix the ATTY, or attorney, that you have worked so hard for. And it is my hope that you will lead this batch of lawyers to be truly just, to have integrity, and to respect and uphold the law that you have studied and toiled over for years. Although I am not a lawyer myself, I have great respect for the legal profession and its proud sons and daughters who contribute to and shape our nation in many ways. May you and the rest of the 2016 bar passers live up to and raise the standards of this distinguished profession. Indeed, may you be guided by the famous creed of former President Ramon Magsaysay, full of meaning in its simplicity. He who has less in life should have more in law. I look forward to seeing you and your batch of lawyers serving our country and its people. Congratulations once again, and thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me this opportunity.
Congratulations too to the proud senator from Bukidnon. Majority Leader, can the chair request for a minute suspension so I can congratulate the bar top-notcher?
Well, before we do that, Mr. President, and with the permission of the body, I would rather move for the consideration of PS Resolution 362, which is congratulating and commending her.
Okay, so any objection? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Maybe ask Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Resolution commending and congratulating Karen May Kalam for being the top-notcher in the 2016 Philippine Bar examination.
Mr. President, I move that the privileged speech of Senator Sabiri be made the sponsorship speech for PS Resolution 362.
What's the motion again, Majority Leader?
That the privileged speech of Senator Subiri be made the sponsorship speech of
Any
PS
objection to the
Resolution
motion? Hearing none, motion is approved.
362. Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt PS Resolution 362, subject to style, making all the members of the Senate co-authors of the said resolution. All those present.
Any objection? There being none, Senate Resolution number 362 is approved, subject to style, with all senators present as co-authors thereof.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we suspend the session for a minute.
Any objection? There being none, session is suspended.
Stay on the left. Stay here on the left.
Manny Pacquiao, please. Very proud mayor yan, siyempre. Sabihin na natin. Pinatik ano? Kasi meron ano. Oo, pero dyan ako sa floor lang. Kaya si Salongga ang inano ko, grinit ko. Topnotcher Salongga. Wala. Kaya nasa ako. Top na number, may resolution. First time. First time. Pamerienda.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Mr. President, after congratulating the bar top-notcher, the Senate would like to congratulate also the Senate employees who all passed the 2016 bar examinations. We have Director Rogelio Cabariban of the Legislative Bill Drafting Service, Ms. Rachel Uwayan, Legislative Committee Support Service A. In the Senate proper, we have Mr. Edgar Alan Pamis, Office of the Senate President, Ms. Katrina Cassandra Nang C., Office of Nancy Binay, Ms. Charina Marta A.J. Vergara Huerta, Office of Senator Sherwin Gatchalian, Ms. Rosa Cecilia Alfara, Office of Senator Richard Gordon, Ms. Julie Ann Tuason, Office of Senator Greg Honasan, and Ms. Darlene Marie T. Javier, Office of Senator Pampilo Lacson. We'd like to congratulate all of them, Mr. President.
Congratulations to all of our new lawyers here in the Senate.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1255 under Committee Report Number 12. Mr. President, this was originally in the agenda for today, but was accidentally omitted, Mr. President. So I so move that we resume consideration.
The motion is to resume consideration of Senate Bill number 1255. Is that correct, Majority Leader?
Yes, Mr.
Under
President.
Committee Report number 12. Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure expanding the coverage of exemption from revealing the source. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we already terminated the period of interpellations. So I move that we therefore move to open the period of amendments because this is a substitute bill. There are no committee amendments and therefore it's only open for period of individual amendments.
Is there any objection to the motion? There being none, the motion is approved. We are now in the period for individual amendments.
May we recognize the sponsor, Senator Grace Poe, Mr. President.
Senator Poe is recognized.
Sotolo,
If,
Sinama Broadcast.
Mr. President, I would like to accept if there are any individual amendments, but we've discussed this extensively. It is really to protect our sources with the current outdated law, which only protects those in writers for newspapers, but television, radio, even the internet, legitimate journalists aren't protected, so this law will do just that.
May we recognize the Minority Leader, Mr. President.
Minority Leader is recognized.
For the record, the minority group is supporting the measure, and we would request the majority leader to already put it to a vote on second reading if there are no other amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our heartfelt gratitude to the Minority Leader and members of the minority and much, as well with the majority. This was originally a bill by my grandfather, Senate Bill number 6 in 1946, Mr. President. That's why it's Republic Act 53. It's now going to be a new number. And we'd like to thank the sponsor for that. So I move to close the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Move to approve on second reading. Senate Bill 1255 under Committee Report number 12.
Is there any objection? There being none, the motion is approved, and Senate Bill number 1255 under Committee Report number 12 is approved on second reading. Ano yun, suspend consideration, ha?
Baka sa ibang bill. Unahin ko na to, may sila. After this. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1280 under...
Can we
Committee
suspend
Report.
consideration, Majority
I'm
Leader?
sorry, Mr. President. I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1255.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1280 under Committee Report number 22.
Is there any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this is the amendments to the
Thank you.
Corporation Code of the Philippines. Parliamentary status is that we're still in the period of individual amendments. So I move to resume the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved. We are now resuming period for individual amendments.
Yes, Mr. President, yesterday there were individual amendments being proposed by Senator Recto, but we decided that it will be made for further study. So in the meantime, may we recognize the Minority Leader, sponsor of the measure, to introduce the other individual amendments.
The Senator Drilon is recognized.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. I confirm the statement of the Majority Leader that indeed yesterday we could not accept the proposal of Senator Recto, and therefore to expedite the debates on this measure, we had proposed to the Majority Leader that we read into the records the amendments submitted to us in writing by Senators Recto, Villar, De Lima, which we have accepted, and that the same, that we're submitting this to the body for approval before we go back to the amendments of Senator Recto.
We'll do it one by one, sir? One by one?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, if we may proceed, the first amendment is on page 2, line 8. After the phrase, whether as stockholders, insert the words, quote, or shareholders, close quote.
Oh, I cannot follow you,
Okay.
Minority page, what,
Yeah,
Minority Leader?
hold on.
Wala eh. Incurring or creating or increasing
Page
bandwidth.
2, line 8, sir.
What? Okay.
This is-
Excuse me. Okay. Can I get this na? Okay, go ahead, Minority Leader.
Page 2, line 8. I will repeat. After the phrase, whether as stockholders, insert the phrase, or shareholders. The reason for this is that the word shareholders was deleted when the second paragraph was incorporated in the first paragraph of this section. The way the section 5 will now read will be submitted in writing, and we move that it be considered as read into the record. The amendment is only the insertion of the words or shareholders. We move to adopt, Mr. President.
For our guidance, Minority Leader, what is the difference between stockholder and shareholder?
This is actually a formal
Legal, it's a
style, yes.
legal style. Any, so, it's actually an amendment already accepted by the sponsor. So
That's
any
correct,
objection? There being none, motion is approved.
Second amendment, page 3, line 17, before the words, quote, to approve, close quote, replace the word necessary with the phrase, quote, required under this code, period, and after the phrase corporate act, delete the words as provided in this code. The rationale for this is that this is a question of style.
Any objection? There being none, motion is approved.
1 minute suspension, Mr. President.
A minute suspension.
May kopya ba si...
Ano yung as provided niya, dinidelete, no? As provided in this code, dinidelete, no?
Meron?
Basahin mo na lang yung ano, buo.
Hindi, pero mahirap sundin kasi nagkapit. Ito ba?
Wala ba? Sabi mo mayroon.
Kopya.
Ito. Kita ko. Ito.
Meron. Ready to resume.
Okay,
sir.
session is resumed.
Mr. President, may we ask the minority leader to read how line 16 to 18 will now appear?
All right. I will do that. It may take us until...
No. Line 16 to 18.
because there is another one, no, there's a number of... 1 minute suspension, sir.
Session suspended. Tinanggal niyo yung ano?
Yes,
Session-
ready to resume?
Session is resumed.
Just to repeat so that we got lost, Mr. President, on page 3, line 17, before the words to approve, replace the word necessary with the phrase required under this code, and after the phrase corporate act, delete the words as provided in this code. A matter of style. And therefore,
Already approved.
Yes.
It has been
Yes.
already approved.
As requested by the majority leader, lines 16 to 18 will now read, except as provided in the immediately preceding paragraph, the vote to approve a particular corporate act shall be deemed to refer only to stocks with voting
The
rights.
vote required,
The vote required under this code
Yeah.
to
the vote
approve.
required under this code to approve a particular corporate act shall be deemed
Yes.
to refer only to stocks with voting rights. That's how it will read now.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, on page 4, line 17, I'm sorry, huh?
7.
On page 4, line 7, sorry. Remove the brackets before the phrase securities and exchange, and after the word commission, insert the phrase enclosed in parentheses, hereinafter referred to as the commission. As commission.
Yes, in effect, mentioning the complete name of the commission and then inserting that henceforth, hereinafter referred to as a commission. So any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
On line 17, delete the word ensuring with a capital with I and replace it with ensuring with an E.
Ensuring.
The reason is obvious, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 8, page 8. On page 8, line 26, and page 9, lines 1, 7, and 13, insert the word, insert the phrase residence before the word addresses.
It will read residence addresses.
That's correct, sir.
Residence address.
Yes.
So these are two. How many?
2 pages, because a continuation.
So four amendments located in 2 pages. Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
On page 10, lines 22 to 23, delete the phrase, a majority of whom are residents of the Philippines. The rationale for this, Mr. President, is to make this provision consistent with the amendment under Section 10 of the Code, which does away with the requirement that the majority of the incorporators shall be residents of the Philippines.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 10, line 24, before the phrase set forth, delete the phrase set forth and replace the same with certify.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 13, line 21, delete the phrase registered, and after the word name, before the comma, insert the words, quote, already registered or reserved for the use of another corporation.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 17, this is section 18, page 17, line 15, after the word distinguishable, add the phrase, quote, from the name already reserved or registered for the use of another corporation. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 17, lines 20 to 22, delete the last sentence which reads, when a change in the new corporate name is approved, the Commission shall issue an amended certificate of incorporation under the amended name, end of the deletion, and replace it with the following phrases. Quote, upon the approval of the new corporate name, the Commission shall issue a certificate of incorporation under the amended name, close quote. Matter of style, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 18, after the word distinguishable, insert the phrase quote from a name already reserved or registered for the use of another corporation, end of quote.
Page 18,
Page 18.
line what, sir?
Line 4. Mr.
18,
President.
line 4, okay. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 19, line 4, after the word personality, insert the phrase as a defense. The phrase was unintentionally deleted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 21, line 16, after the bracketed phrase insurance companies, insert end.
And, okay.
Page 21,
Yes, sir, yes, sir.
line 16.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 21, lines 20 to 24, delete the entire paragraph appearing on lines 20 to 24 on page 21 and replace the same with the following. Quote, a person who, apart from his fees and shareholdings, is independent of management and free from any business or other relationship which could or could reasonably be perceived to, comma, materially interfere with the exercise of independent judgment in carrying out his responsibilities as a director. This is a definition of an independent director. For clarity, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
1 minute suspension, Mr.
Session
President.
is suspended. Yung kanina, yung certification kanina parang
An independent director. Ready to resume, Mr. President.
session is resumed.
With the indulgence of the Senate President of the Chamber, we missed to read a phrase in the amendment just approved. And may we be allowed to insert the phrase at the beginning of the amendment, insert the phrase, an independent director is. This is the definition of independent director.
Okay, so page 21,
Lines 20 to 24.
lines 20 to 24, we deleted the paragraph and we now introduce a new paragraph.
That's correct, sir.
Okay, and then the introductory phrase, the introductory words would be an independent director is
Is
et
a
cetera,
person.
et cetera. Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, this correct version of the amendment is approved.
On page 22, line 2, insert the letter S after the word membership. So it's plural instead of
Yes.
singular.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 22, on the same page, line 3, delete the phrase in line and replace with the word align.
Align.
Yes, page 22, line 3.
Yes, sir. Align. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 24,
Align.
line 26, insert the word and before the word or and replace the phrase to the extent not so provided with the phrase as resolved. We repeat for clarity. On page 24, line 26, insert the word and before the word or and replace the phrase quote to the extent not so provided end of quote with the phrase quote as resolved close quote.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 26, lines 13 and 14, delete the entire paragraph which reads, quote, "In electing directors or trustees to fill vacancies, the procedure set forth in section 24 shall apply." This is a Villar amendment. We are accepting this.
Deletion is a deletion. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 26, line 19, page 26, line 19, add the phrase, quote, "convicted by final judgment," end of quote, before the colon.
Before the colon. Okay, any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Still on the same page, lines 20 to 21, delete the phrase, quote, "convicted by final judgment."
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Still on the same page, lines 21 to 23, delete the phrase, quote, "or of a violation of this code or Republic Act 8799, otherwise known as the Securities Regulation Code," end of quote, and insert a new number 2 and number 3 to read as follows. Number 2, for violating this code, semicolon. 3, for violating Republic Act number 8799, otherwise known as the Securities Regulation Code. That's the amendment, Your Honor, we submit.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 26, line 26, delete the phrase, "convicted by final judgment." We submit.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 27, line 1, delete the phrase, "convicted by final judgment." We submit.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 27, line 3, delete the word "and" the phrase "paragraph 1" and insert "and 3" before the word "above."
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Page 35, Your Honor, Mr. President, line 17 and 18, replace the phrase "through deposit in the post office with postage prepaid" with the word "personally." We repeat, page 35, line 17 and 18, delete the phrase "through deposit in the post office with postage preface" and replace the same with the word "personally."
Any objection? Approved.
Page 35, line 20, delete the phrase "or serve personally on the stockholder."
Any objection? Approved.
On page 43, line 20, after the words "special meetings," insert the phrase "and mode of notifying the stockholders or members thereof."
Any objection? Approved.
Lines 43, I'm sorry, still on the same page, line 21, delete the phrase "of the stockholders or members." I repeat, still on page 43, line 21, delete the phrase "of the stockholders or members."
Any objection? Approved.
Still on page 43, lines 24 and 25, delete the whole paragraph 4 and replace, delete the whole number 4 and replace with, quote, "the modes by which a stockholder, member, director, or trustee may attend meetings and cast their votes," close quote. We submit, Mr. President.
That would still be number 4.
Number 4, yes,
Yes,
sir.
okay. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 47, line 24, insert the words "and/or" after the semicolon.
and slash O. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the same page, page 47, line 26, replace the semicolon with a period and delete the words and/or.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 47, lines 27 to 28, and page 48, lines 1 and 2, delete the whole letter L.
Any objection? Approved.
This, for the record, this is a recto amendment submitted in writing to the sponsor. Page 51, line 23. Replace the words and figures 5 with 2.
2. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
For the record, this is an amendment submitted by Senator Villar. On page 53, line 6, replace the word regular with ordinary.
It's a, it's
Page
already
53,
53, line 6.
line 6.
It's already ordinary.
Is it? Sorry.
Okay.
Huh? What?
Replace the word regular with ordinary.
Reflected then. I'm sorry, we withdraw that amendment. It is already found in the version of
Your amendment.
May 2,
2.
which was already approved. Thank you, Mr. President. On page 64, line 7. Page 64, line 7, replace the word upon with on. On.
On. Any objection? Approved.
On page 74, line 19, replace the comma with a period and replace the word which with the word the. And on the same page, line 20, delete the words as of. Matter of style, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 89, line 1, after the words one person, delete the word stock. And on line 2, after the words one person, delete the word stock. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Line 3, sir.
Line 2, sir. Page 89, lines 1.
Line 1 and line 3. Is that correct?
Huh? Sorry. Huh? Yes, we
Line
stand
3?
corrected.
Okay. So it's a deletion of the word stock before, to make it one person corporations. Okay.
Yes.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 89, line 16, after the word corporation, insert the phrase for the purpose of exercising such profession.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the, for the record, an amendment of Senator De Lima submitted to the sponsor. On page 98, line 12, the bracket should only be on dissolution. So that,
Insert the word voluntary before dissolution in the title of the section.
that's correct.
Okay.
That's
Any-
correct, yes.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 112, lines 7 to 9, delete the whole paragraph. Because the proposed amendment is being introduced as confusion. What's this? The proposed amendment is being introduced to avoid confusion as to how the SEC would initiate complaints.
So the amendment is a deletion of
Yes.
a paragraph. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 115, line 8, delete the reference to 179 and add sections 130 and 178 in the enumeration. Repeat on page 115, line 8. Delete the reference to section 179 and add a reference to sections 130 and 178 in the enumeration.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 116, line 11, delete the word one after the words ranging from. This is a typographical error, Mr. President.
Yes. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 126, lines 13 to 16, delete the whole paragraph and replace it with, quote, in imposing penalties and additional monitoring and supervision requirements, the Commission shall take into consideration the size, nature of the business, and capacity of the corporation, end of quote.
So, any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Those are all the, okay, sorry. Senator Villanueva proposes an amendment which reads, which we have accepted and submitting to the chamber. Unless Senator Villanueva would want to propose it himself.
Meron daw siya mga amendment.
Ito nga. Ito. We accept it. Yeah. Unless, 1 minute suspension.
Session suspended. Pakitingin nga si Senator Villanueva. Kung nandyan sa likod.
Acceptable. Kasi kung isa sa style ng parang nalito.
Wala siya? Wala. Pakisabi kay Tito Sen.
Oh, yeah. Ano, nandiyan ba siya? Ha? Okay. Kay ano ito kay Joel? Kay Joel ito. Pwede na, basahin ko na, hindi naman mahaba. Ito.
Ikaw mag-propose, Joel? Ikaw mismo?
Mr. President, we're ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
May we now recognize Senator Joel Villanueva to propose his individual amendments.
Senator Villanueva.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Thank you, Mr. President. Would the distinguished sponsor accept this humble representation to propose an amendment on page 35, line 25? This representation, Mr. President, would like to propose the inclusion of the words, and I quote, "and other related laws," close quote, after the words, "the Philippine Competition Act." I am proposing this amendment, Mr. President, to ensure that we maintain the applicability of this proposed law
Page?
to other subsequent and future legislation, and not necessarily limited only to Republic Act number 10667 or the Philippine Competition Act. I maintain, Mr. President, that we should allow for the possibility of other pending and future legislation so as to ensure that we will not be hampered with having to amend this law in the future.
It's on page 35.
It's on page 37, line 25.
37, okay, line, that's why I cannot follow. Page 37, line 25, okay.
Page 37,
Line
line
25.
25.
Line 25.
On, yes, to insert the phrase, "and other related laws."
Laws.
Yes.
Okay.
After the words, the Philippine Competition
You
Act.
accept, Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, on that same section on page 38, line 13, I'd like to propose that the sentence beginning with the words, "The determination of whether or not the sale involves all or substantially all of the corporation's properties," and all the rest of the paragraph begin under a new paragraph. Mr. President, line 10 of page 38 until line 13 of the same page refer to non-stock corporations only. However, the paragraph beginning with "the determination of whether or not" pertains to a general rule that the determination of the corporation's assets must be based on the net asset value as shown in its latest financial statements. This rule, Mr. President, covers all corporations and not just non-stock corporations. Again, Mr. President, this is simply for purposes of clarity and to ensure that it is clear that the general rule applies to all corporations and not only non-stock corporations.
We accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished sponsor. Mr. President, section 53 of the proposed bill,
Page, please.
page 51, Mr. President.
Section 53.
Section 53 of the proposed bill provides that a majority of the directors of trustees shall constitute a quorum. I'm sure the distinguished sponsor pertains to the majority of the directors as stated in the articles of incorporation. Thus, Mr. President, I'd like to propose the following: to remove any ambiguity on page 51, line 7, insert the phrase "as stated in the articles of incorporation" after the word trustees. Thus, section 53, Mr. President, will read as follows: unless the articles of incorporation or the bylaws provides for a greater majority, a majority of the directors or trustees as stated in the articles of incorporation shall constitute a quorum to transact corporate business.
We accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished author. For the last individual amendments that this representation would like to propose, on page 52, line 6, after the word transaction, Mr. President, I propose to delete the period and add the following words: without prejudice to compliance with the requirements of section 32 of this code. Thus, the last paragraph of section 53 shall read as follows: a director or trustee who has a potential interest in any related party transaction must recuse himself or herself from voting on the approval of the related party transaction without prejudice to compliance with the requirements of section 32 of this code, close quote. This amendment, Mr. President, will make it clear that this provision should be read in conjunction with section 32 of the Corporation Code on dealing of directors, trustees, or officers of the corporation.
We accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, distinguished sponsor.
Mr. President, to facilitate the taking up this continuation of the period of individual amendments, some of the members of the Senate who wish to propose amendments are not here. So with the indulgence of the Minority Leader, we may ask and direct the Senate Secretary to provide us with a clean copy, and it will be marked as of May 9, 2017, and distribute a copy to the members tomorrow, Mr. President. So move.
So, any objection to the motion? Motion is approved.
So in the meantime, I move to suspend consideration of Senate Bill 1280
Clean
under
copy
Committee
of the bill,
Report 22.
Clean copy request. Any objection? There being none, we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 1280.
Thank you. Mr. President, with the permission of the Chamber, I move to resume consideration of House Bill number 937 under Committee Report number 47.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the measure dividing Barangay North Bay Boulevard South in Navotas. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we are now in the period of interpellations. So may we therefore move to recognize the sponsor, the Chair of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara.
The sponsor is recognized, Senator Angara.
Mr. President, considering that there are no senators who made reservations to interpellate, I move to terminate the period of interpellation.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, move to open the period of committee amendments on House Bill number 937 under Committee Report number 47.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues. On page 2, line 20, to replace the words within 30 with the words not later than 120. I so move, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Those are the only committee amendments, Mr. President, but we have some individual amendments. If we may be allowed to
So-
propound those.
So we will now close without, if there is no objection, the motion is to close the period for committee amendments and open, and at the same time open in period for individual amendments. There being none, approved. Senator Angara is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 1, line 2, to include the acronym in parentheses NBBS after the word South.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Secondly, on territorial boundaries of Barangay NBBS proper, page 1, to delete lines 8 to 13, and in lieu thereof, to insert the following. Bounded on the northeast, NE in brackets, points 1 to 11 by center line of North Bay Boulevard. On the southeast, points 11 to 19 by center line of Estero de Muralia. On the southwest, points 19 to 24 by Manila Bay, and on the northwest, points 24 to point of beginning by center lines of Entrance Gate Road, Navotas Fishport Complex, and Lapu-Lapu Avenue. The technical description of Barangay NBBS proper is as contained in the technical description which is on the screen at the moment, Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues. It's a bit difficult to read, so I think it's better that it be entered into the record as instructed by the Majority Leader.
May we be furnished, maybe all the members of the Senate be furnished
Yes.
copies of the proposed amendments, particularly...
They were furnished earlier today, distinguished Majority Leader. Maybe we can ask the PowerPoint to be lifted up so the table will be visible to our colleagues. That's the table, Mr. President. Lower a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Part of the amendment is the incorporation of the table into the
Yes,
law, into the measure.
Yes, Mr. President. And the last words are containing an area of 1,306,137.1468 square meters, more or less, close quotations. The rationale is the LMB said the bill contained the boundaries or technical description from an old map, and these are the updated boundaries, Mr. President. So move for this amendment, Mr. President.
For clarification, the amendment would be the words starting with bounded, no? Also bounded, no? Can you show the upper portion of the amendment? So,
Yeah, bounded
on
on the
the northeast, and then all the way to the table.
Yes.
Senator Angara, to the
Yes.
table, and then
ending with the phrase,
can we? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I am interested in, the ending phrase.
ending with the phrase.
Ending with the
Pakiakit lang
phrase.
konti, please. Hindi, that's too much.
The
Baba
continuation.
tayo. After the table, just after,
After
the
the
table,
table,
ho,
yes.
may phrase doon. Pakita lang ho natin. Yan, malapit na ho.
Yun,
Yan,
okay.
yung, Mr. President,
Okay.
that last phrase. is,
Containing an area of, yes,
1
a million plus square meters, more or less. Any objection?
The motion is to to make the amendment deemed read into the records, Mr. President. Is that the motion, Mr.
That's the motion, Mr. President.
So step by
Majority
step
Leader.
first. Motion is to be deemed read. Any objection? Hearing none, the amendment is deemed read.
Mr. President, the next is a similar amendment containing similar language, if we could raise it up so our colleagues could see it. Starting from that phrase, bounded on the northwest, points 1 to 3 by center line of Lapu-Lapu Avenue, going down to include the table, kung maibabaho natin para maipakita.
Tatlo, puro ganun.
Again, the coordinates are there. And there is again a similar closing phrase containing an area of 613,127.2303 square meters, more or less. That is the amendment we so move, Mr. President. Similarly-
President.
Yeah.
For the enlightenment of the minority leader, because I am going to ask you not to recognize him, Mr. President, he might start asking the line by line of this. So, may we know from the sponsor the reason why the Land Management Bureau submitted this for amendments? And why it is necessary that we should amend it?
It's just updating the bill, Mr. President. We could do it here, we could do it at the BICAM, but these are the more accurate or the latest. They did a survey, no? Recently. Yeah.
Is that applicable to only this barangay or the,
Well, there are two other similar bills.
so
Mr.
only three barangays?
3 barangays.
Out of the 42,000 barangays, these are the only...
No, I think the problem is the original bill of Congressman Tiangco was based on the older map. So now, when they did the resurvey, there's a little bit. I think it's more or less the same, but to us, I think to the for those mapping it out, there's a need to be exact in the
Okay,
and to be technical. Yes.
This does not mean that all the other proposed new barangays will have the same problem.
No, Mr. President.
Anyway, I withdraw my motion not to recognize the minority leader.
Just for clarity, Mr. President, just for clarity, in the laws creating the barangays, which do not contain a technical description of the boundaries, that should be no problem, because if the boundaries are changed, it is not in the law, it's an administrative procedure. What about instances where the law that created the barangay contained a technical description, meets and bounds, and is now outmoded or no longer applicable because of the new survey done by the LNB? Is
can
that
that be
feasible? Is that fair, valid?
Can the new survey change the law? The issue not based on the law. Yeah.
The way I understand it, Mr. President, with the permission of the sponsor, is that this can only happen to newly created barangays. Yeah, the old barangays, the previous barangays will not have the same problem. So the fear is should not be there.
So we're saying that in the other barangays that were created, there is no description of the look of the area by meets and bounds.
Yes,
And therefore, the changes in the area, in the resurvey is not material for purposes of the bill.
yes, that is right, Mr. President.
I might as well take this opportunity to ask, what about in municipalities or cities which we create where there are boundaries described by meets and bounds? Are there also changes
Mr.
in
President,
the boundaries decreed by the Land Management Bureau,
If
which
I
could
may,
affect this
yeah.
bill?
Mr. President, the earlier bill, or what was contained in the earlier bill, the meets and bounds were not certified by the Land Management Bureau.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sponsor, I'm not referring to these bills. I'm referring in general.
Yes.
Because you're saying that now we have to do this because of the change in the description. What I'm asking for the record is, I know for a fact that when we create cities, we include the meets and bounds of the cities created. The question that I'm raising, and not in relation, not in regards to this barangay, but on the other, in general, would there be a concern that the meets and bounds described in the law for these cities that we created are no longer valid?
I'm not really sure, Mr. President. To be honest, I don't know how authoritative my answer would be, but I think if we passed a law and the technical boundaries were not certified by the Land Management Bureau, then there might be a problem. But if it was certified previously by the Land Management Bureau and they want to do a change, then that would depend on their technical findings. But in this case, the original contents of the bill were not certified by the Land Management Bureau. And now that they've conducted a survey, they say these are the technical descriptions of this barangay. But in the case of the municipalities mentioned by the minority leader, I'm not certain if those technical descriptions contained in those pieces of legislation were certified by the Land Management Bureau. It would depend, I suppose, on case-to-case basis, Mr. President.
Well, whether or not certified, the fact is it is in the law. And anyway, maybe that's something that the Committee on Local Governments can look into now that you brought up this issue.
Yes, we'll bring it up with the Land Management Bureau, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, distinguished minority leader.
One observation of the chair is that, for example, the second amendment, in the original measure, it's 614,000 square meters. The amendment will now make it 613,000 plus square meters. But in the first amendment, it became 1 million, right? While the measure from the House, it's only 589,000 plus square meters. So should we be alarmed by the increase in the size actually of that barangay? All of a sudden.
With the permission of the sponsor, that precisely makes valid our observation, because the era is affected by the size of the local of the locality. If it's bigger, then the era gets bigger. Now this becomes a problem, especially when it involves municipalities and cities. When the description, the technical description is bigger than what is stated in the law.
If the amendment becomes law, then that is now the law. But I'm just wondering how come it's too far, our amendment is too far from the original measure.
If I may, Mr. President.
Coming from the congressman of the area.
Mr. President, in fact, I am looking beyond these two measures on the floor. I'm talking about in general. When we create cities, I am sure that we have meets and bounds there. If that, and that is the basis for the internal revenue allotment of the city. If that is no longer valid because it has been expanded on a new map of the Land Management Bureau, what happens now? That's all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, in response to your query, the original land area of 500,000 which you mentioned was based on a local survey conducted by the city. And when the LMB did the actual survey, they discovered that the actual land area was over 1 million square meters. So in this case, that explains the discrepancy between the 500,000 and the over a million square meters.
Is the Senate President satisfied, Mr. President?
Yeah, and I just made that observation na here in the Senate, we are amending the law which came from the House, and the author is presumed to know his place better than us.
Mr. President, the fear of the minority leader is valid. And I distinctly remember, it's a good thing I remember, I saw Senator Gerson Alvarez here.
He's still there.
He was with me when I was chairman of the Committee on Local Government in the 9th Congress. And when we tackled the cityhood of Makati, and that's precisely the issue of the minority leader, when we tackled the cityhood of Makati, there was a court case between Taguig and Makati on the meets and bounds of Makati. So it took us about 6 months interpolation on the bill because we were being charged with gerrymandering. We were creating a second district in Makati. I'm sure Senator Alvarez remembers that distinctly. Now, what we did was we removed the meets and bounds of the cityhood, the charter, and what we did was a catch-all phrase that said, leaving it to the courts to decide, on the factual meets and bounds of Makati as a city, because it was being questioned by Taguig during that time. That included the Fort Bonifacio also, Mr. President. So I wonder what the sponsor would think if we do not include this meets and bounds as of now.
Fine. What would satisfy the Senate President, because I'm not rushing on this bill. It's more of the congressman who is rushing on this bill.
Actually, I am in favor of putting the boundary, but a discrepancy of, let us say, from the original measure, I'm talking about Barangay NBBS Kaunlaran, for example, 614,000 square meters. Our amendment will now make it 613,000 square meters. Okay, that's acceptable, that discrepancy. But the previous one,
Can you move it down, please?
Barangay NBBS proper, the original measure mentions that it has an area of 589,000 plus square meters, and then our amendment makes it 1 million, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sponsor. Can we see the...
It's 1,306,000, Mr. President.
Sa taas, please. It's the first one. I'm referring to the first amendment.
Yes, it's 1,306,000.
So, yun lang yun. So, because of that observation, I'm quite... Oh, yun. Tapos na. I'm alarmed. 1.3 million is our amendment will now state that that barangay has more or less 1.3 million square meters. Original measure says it has 589,000 plus square meters. So shouldn't we be alarmed or concerned? How come it all of a sudden
we can
enlarged? Yeah.
We can reconsider it, Mr. President, and we can send. We can ask for the presence of the Land Management Bureau to explain to us the
Yes, ganun na lang.
the specifics of this.
Minority Leader.
With the permission of, with the consent of the good sponsor.
Yes, certainly, Mr. President.
You know, the observation of the Senate President is very valid, but from another standpoint, we better examine this closely, because when you affect the boundaries of the barangays, and I assume when you expanded it from 500,000 to 1.3 million, the additional 800,000 square meters will be coming from the other barangays, who will now have a reduced internal revenue allotment, and who will complain. Because this is not a reclamation. You'll be eating from this increase in the area will have effects on the internal revenue allotment of the barangays, where the barangay who will be affected will certainly complain that their area will be reduced by the reduction of the area.
Mr. President, I think the assumption behind the statement of the minority leader is that the increase from 1.2 to 1.3 million square meters from 500,000 square meters was taken from another barangay. But the LMB told my staff that the reason why they had to resurvey is precisely because in their observation, there was missing at least 500,000 square meters. And that's why they undertook to do the survey, and they discovered that it was not just 500,000, but in fact 800,000 square meters. But it was not taken from any barangay. Therefore, there is no diminution in any other barangay's
So this is
internal
just-
revenue allotment.
This is
Mali lang talaga ho yung, Mr. President, if I may finish, mali lang ho talaga yung initial bill filed in terms of the technical metes and bounds and descriptions. Mali lang ho talaga. And the role of these amendments is to place them in line with the reality of our geography or technical descriptions. And again, I'm not rushing this bill at all, Mr. President. If you want to suspend it for a week, a month, a year, it's of no issue to me.
We can study.
We can have them present if you would like, Mr. President, but for me, it's such a simple matter to, that perhaps it's not worth debating at length.
Can we suspend? Suspend.
We have a 1 minute suspension. Mr.
Session suspended.
What do you want to do? What do you want? Oh. See, Mr. President. Boss, what do you want to do?
What you're saying is that this is
Ready to resume, Mr.
Session
President?
is resumed.
Mr. President, just to set the record straight, earlier, the motion we moved for, or we filed, was, or proposed, was to have the meets and mounts deemed red.
Yes.
And it was approved.
On the, referring to the amendments to
amendment.
Barangay NBBS proper.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Now, the motion, I believe necessary is to, for the amendment to be approved.
Okay, so there's a motion to approve the amendment as deemed read. Any objection? Referring to Barangay NBBS proper, just to be very, very clear. Okay, there being no objection, a motion is approved.
Mr. President, before we move to the next proposed amendment, we take note of the Senate President's eagle-eyed observation regarding the expansion in terms of
Number.
the land area from 500,000 to 1.3, and we undertake to consult with the LMB and explain the growth in the land area accordingly, Mr. President.
Just a second look.
Yes, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we can now proceed to Barangay NBBS Kaunlaran.
Yes, Mr. President, the same motion
Same
regarding what is being shown
So,
on the screen.
Can we show the amendments, please? Okay. The motion now is to consider this proposed amendment as deemed read into our records. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And you now moved, the motion is to approve the said amendment. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the same motion with respect to page 2, lines 9 to 17,
9 to
referring to Barangay NBBS
Okay.
Dagat-Dagatan,
Okay.
with similar language and different figures, however, as shown on the screen, Mr. President.
Any objection to the motion to deem the shown amendments read? There being none, approved. Motion to, any objection to the motion to approve the amendments? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the last amendment is on the title, to just
Title.
add the acronym NBBS in brackets after the word South. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to close the period of individual amendments on House Bill 937.
Any
under committee.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading House Bill 937 under Committee Report Number 47.
Any objection?
Wait.
Hearing none, we approve on second reading House Bill number 937 under Committee Report number 47.
Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move to resume consideration of House Bill 938 under Committee Report Number 49.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure dividing Barangay Tangos in Navotas. Parliamentary status of the measure is now in the period of interpellation. May we therefore recognize the sponsor of the chair of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. The first committee amendment is a similar. I'm sorry, there are no other members who have expressed an intent to interpolate, Mr. President.
Move to
Okay.
close the period of interpellation, Mr.
Okay,
President.
period is both opened and closed.
I move to open the period of committee amendments, Mr. President, and recognize
Any
Senator Sani
objection?
Angara.
Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Majority Leader, Mr. President. It's a similar amendment to the earlier bill. The first committee amendment, and the only committee amendment, is to replace the period for the conduct of a plebiscite. So to replace the words within 30 to the words not later than 120 in words and figures, Mr. President.
Where is that found, sir?
Page 2, line 11, Mr. President.
Page 2, line 11. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
No other committee amendments, Mr. President. There are a
So,
few individual amendments.
We move to close. Mr. Sponsor, do you move to close?
Move to close,
Okay.
Mr.
Any
President.
objection? Hearing none, approved.
Move to open the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, on page 1, the territorial boundaries of Barangay Tangos North, to delete lines 8 to 13, and in lieu thereof, insert the following language as appearing on the screen, similar to the language in the earlier bill, where it sets forth the boundaries on the northwest and the northeast, the southeast, the southwest, so forth, and then putting forth the technical description of Barangay Tangos as indicated on the screen, containing an area of 206,000 258.6782 square meters, more or less, Mr. President.
206,000. So the motion is to consider as the proposed amendment as deemed read into our records. Any objection? Hearing none, approved. On the motion to approve, any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next amendment is on the territorial boundaries of Barangay Tangos South, page 2, to delete lines 2 to 8 and replace with the language appearing
Sabay na lang yung deemed read.
on the screen, again setting forth the boundaries, northwest, northeast, southeast, northeast, southeast, southwest, as well as the technical description as contained, again, being flashed on the screen, Mr. President, to contain an area of 166,949.7434 square meters, Mr. President. So move.
The motion is to consider the proposed amendment as deemed read and approve the same. Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those are the only amendments. There are no other amendments.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I move to close the period of committee amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
There are no individual amendments. Move to close the period of individual amendments.
Oh, we're done.
Okay.
We're done with the individual
I move
amendments.
that we approve on second reading House Bill 938 under
And-
Committee Report Number 49.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 938 under Committee Report number 49 is approved on second reading.
Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of House Bill 4402 under Committee Report Number 50.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
This is the measure dividing Barangay Tansa in Abotas. Parliamentary status of the measure. We are in the period of interpellations. I move to recognize the sponsor, Chair of the Committee on Local Government, Senator Sani Angara. There are no reservations for interpellation. I move to close the period of interpellation.
Okay. The period for interpellation is hereby closed.
Move to open the period to committee amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader. There's one committee amendment, and it's similar to the earlier two bills, to replace, on page 2, line 20 of the bill, to replace the words within 30 with the words not later than 120. This refers to the period for the conduct of a plebiscite, Mr. President. So move.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
No other committee amendments. I move to close, Mr. President.
Any objection? We close period for committee amendments.
We have
There
a
are-
few individual.
Thank
Yes.
Are there any individual amendments?
There's a few, Mr. President.
I move to open the period of individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, Majority Leader, distinguished colleagues, again, similar amendments which are similar in nature, which set forth the technical boundaries for Barangay Tanza 1, to delete page 1, lines 7 to 13, and page 2, lines 1 to 5, and in lieu thereof, insert the following, as indicated, the technical bounds on the northeast, southeast, southwest and southeast, southwest, northeast, southeast, and so forth, Mr. President, as well as the technical description as contained, as shown, and ending with the words containing an area of 2,559,700.9698 square meters, more or less. Mr. President, so move.
The motion is to consider the proposed amendment as read and approve the same. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the next amendment is again on the territorial boundaries on page 2 to delete lines 7 to 17 and replace with the language as appearing on the screen with the table and ending with the words containing an area of 2,749,600.3232 square meters, more or less, Mr. President. So move.
The motion is to consider the proposed amendment as read and to approve the same. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
No other amendments, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President, Majority Leader and Minority Leader.
I move to close the period of individual amendments, Mr. President.
Any objection? There being none, approved.
Move to approve on second reading House Bill 4402 under Committee Report number 50.
Any objection? Hearing none, House Bill number 4402 under Committee Report number 50 is approved on second reading. Thank you, Senator
Thank you,
Angara.
Mr. President, Majority Leader, Distinguished Minority Leader.
Welcome to Senator Gordon. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move to resume consideration of Senate Bill 1353 under Committee Report number 40.
Okay. Any objection? Ano to? Resumption? Resumption, sir, of consideration?
Yes, move to resume consideration.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, this is the proposed measure on the refusal of hospital and medical clinics to administer medical treatment in emergency cases. The parliamentary status of the measure is that we were in the period of interpellation. So I move to recognize the Senator Risa Ontiveros, who is sponsoring the measure. And I am not informed of any interpellators on the measure, Mr. President. So I move to close the period of interpellation.
Senator Ontiveros is recognized, but since there are no interpellators, there's a motion to close. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Majority.
Mr. President, I move to open the period of committee amendments.
Thank
Any
you.
objection? Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator
There are
Ontiveros.
the committee has no committee amendments, Mr. President.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, this is a substitute bill, so there are no committee amendments. I move to open the period of individual amendments. May we know from the sponsor if there are any individual amendments.
Mr. President, there are no individual amendments.
I move to close the period of amendments, Mr. President.
So we close the entire period of amendments.
Mr. President, I move to approve on second reading Senate Bill 1353 under Committee Report number 40.
Any objection? Hearing none, Senate Bill number 1353 under Committee Report number 40 is approved on second reading.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr.
Thank you, Majority
President.
Leader.
With the permission of the sponsor, Mr. President, this is a measure that we have been lauding, and therefore we will be honored to be made the co-authors or either co-sponsors, the Senate President and the Majority Leader, if you do not mind, Mr. President, and the Minority Leader, Mr. President.
Senator Gordon is raising his hand. Yes, Senator Gordon?
And Senator Gordon, of course, this is
Yes, Mr.
hospital.
President, because I noticed I was not able to sign, maybe at the time it was presented, I was not here, but I am a co-chairperson here in this joint committee undertaking. I would like to manifest that I am in support of this bill. I was going to propose amendments, but I want to speed this up already, but anyway, it's okay. Thank you.
No amendments? Okay.
No, another time.
Okay, so can we be made co-authors with the permission of the sponsor and
Thank you
presumably
so
the main
much,
author?
Mr. President, Mr. Majority Leader, my Minority Leader, and the good gentleman from Zambales, very gladly and gratefully accepted. Maraming
All
salamat
right.
po.
Thank you. Mr. President, I move to suspend consideration after the passage on second reading. Senate Bill 1353 under Committee Report number 40.
Any objection? Hearing none, we suspend consideration of the measure.
Mr. President, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved. Ito na. Secretary, please do the reference of business.
Bills on first reading.
1438, an act protecting women in state custody, prescribing the minimum standards for the treatment, penalizing acts in violations thereof, and for other purposes, by Senator Laila M. de Lima.
Referred to the Committees on Women, Children, Family Relations, and Gender Equality, and Justice and Human Rights.
Resolutions, 363, resolution directing the Senate Committees on Finance and Climate Change to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the Philippines' access to climate finance and the implementation of projects financed by climate finance mechanisms and instruments toward strengthening the country's ability to maximize these funds for transformative climate change mitigation and adaptation and disaster risk reduction programs. Senator Ligarda.
To the Committees on Finance and Climate Change.
364, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs to conduct an investigation in aid of legislation into the murder of Attorney Mia Mascarenhas Green and other unsolved killings of environmental advocates and activists in the Philippines, with the end in view of examining the sufficiency of Philippine National Police procedures in these instances. Senator Risa Hontiveros.
To the Committee on Public Order and Dangerous Drugs.
365, resolution recognizing the important role of the Commission on Human Rights on the occasion of its 30th founding anniversary on 5 May 2017. Senator Laila de Lima.
To the Committee on Rules.
366, resolution urging the proper Senate committees to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the status of the country's roads, the procedure of determining roads for maintenance works, and the reason behind the seemingly repetitive and frequent road maintenance works, with the end goal of enacting the necessary legislative measure to ensure the proper monitoring, inventorying, and auditing of road works and road maintenance projects to eliminate unnecessary costs on the part of government and ease traffic for the convenience of motorists. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committee on Public Works.
367, resolution urging the Senate Committee on Public Services to conduct an inquiry in aid of legislation on the compliance of insurance companies with their mandate under the law to immediately settle and or pay claims on their policies involving motor vehicle mishaps, and with the end goal of formulating legislative measures to ensure quick payments of valid and justified insurance claims. Senator Grace Poe.
To the Committees on Banks, Financial Institutions and Currencies, and Public Services.
368, resolution directing the proper Senate committees to investigate in aid of legislation on the travel advisories issued by several countries to the Republic of the Philippines, reported to have adverse effects on the tourism industry development and economic growth. Maria Lourdes Nancy Binay.
The Committees on Tourism and National Defense and Security.
Additional reference of Business Committee Report, Committee Report number 60, prepared and submitted jointly by the Committees on Energy and Finance on Senate Bill number 1439, with Senator Win Gatchalian as author thereof, entitled An Act Establishing the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop for the purpose of streamlining the permitting process of energy generation projects, recommending its approval in substitution of Senate Bill number 1286, Senator Win Gatchalian.
To the calendar for ordinary business. Majority Leader.
Mr. President, may I manifest for the record the changes in the membership of the Congressional Oversight Committee on Quality Affordable Medicines. As the new chairperson of the Committee on Health and Demography, Senator Joseph Victor Ejercito will replace Senator Hontiveros as vice chairperson. And Senator Hontiveros will still be a member of the Oversight Committee as the representative of the minority, replacing Senator Sani Trillanes. I think this has been cleared with them. So just for the manifestation on the floor, Mr. President.
Manifestation is noted.
quality, affordable medicine. Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until, I'm sorry, Mr. President, earlier we approved the journal of the 78th session. There is a minor correction, so I move to resume for the reconsideration. I move for the reconsideration of the journal of the 78th session, Monday, May 8, 2017.
Any objection? Hearing none, we reconsider the approval of the said journal.
May we recognize the minority leader, Mr. President?
Senator Drilon is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, on page 1398, on the right column, the second paragraph of the right column, the sentence, the second to the last sentence of that paragraph, and let me read it. He added that in the said case, Petitioner Roy, Justice Carpio, and Justice Leonen were of the opinion that the nationality test requirement should be applied separately to each class of share. It is quite obvious that the spelling ITS is erroneous. It should be EACH.
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 Each, yes.
That's all. So we so move to correct.
Any objection to the correction? There being none, the correction is approved.
With that, Mr. President, I move to approve the journal of the 78th session, Monday, May 8, 2017.
As corrected.
As corrected, yes.
Any objection? Hearing none, motion is approved.
Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, May 10, 2017.
Any objection? Hearing none, session is adjourned until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, May 10, 2017.